Week 4 recap. Let's get it.
Welcome to FaZe Fantasy Live with your host, Lonnie Z.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Lonnie Z. I'm your host, and this is FaZe Fantasy Live. Along with me, as usual, is Jake Hanson, and we're going to be breaking down what just happened in week 4, all the stuff that you need to help you make good decisions moving forward into week 5. What's up, Jake? How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, Lonnie. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So we had a crazy week. Once again, it wasn't as crazy as week 3, but it had some, ups and downs and a few different things, a couple of key injuries that we're going to talk about here. But let's just jump right into it, brother. Minnesota and Carolina, the Vikings, the big story here. The Vikings finally got their first win. Cousins' game was kind of subpar. What was your take on that game?
The Vikings just did enough to win that game. That's what it seemed like. It was pretty slow in the first half. The Vikings defense stepped it up, and they pretty much won the game this week for the Vikings. Cousins, he made some more mistakes this week. He didn't do too crazy on passing yards and all that this week, but he did get his 2 touchdown passes. It's like that's what he's averaging every game. Right. But a fantasy score wise, he only had 11. Alexander Madison, he finally came out and he had a good game. He had 10 fantasy points. Cam Akers made his debut. He had 7 fantasy points. And Justin Jefferson, he started a roll. He has 26 fantasy points this week. And the Panthers, Bryce Young, he struggled. He didn't do too well. But he had 8 fantasy points. Miles Sanders, he's not looking too well. He had 6 fantasy points. Chuba Hubbard, that's what we talked about last week, keep an eye on Chuba Hubbard. We think he's going to break out, and he had 7, but he had more yards than Sanders. So, and then Adam Thielen, he had 15 fantasy points. Terrace Marshall, he did all right with 14 fantasy points, and Hayden Hurst, he didn't do nothing but 1 fantasy point.
Yeah, Hayden Hurst has been a major disappointment. We were looking up. We thought that this guy was going to have a big year, and that just hasn't transpired. They really haven't been getting him the ball. It looks like Adam Thielen is a guy that has all the trust there with Young, Bryce Young. Once again, Thielen had a good game against, his former team. He had 8 targets. He didn't lead the team in targets, though. That was Terrace Marshall Jr. with 10, and he had 9 receptions for 56 yards. That's his second game in a row that he's had a good target share. And so, he's definitely someone to keep your eye on the waiver wire. You want to take a look at Terrace Marshall Jr. Even though he's not blowing it up fantasy point wise, he's starting to get volume, and that's what you want in fantasy football. You want that volume. So look to Terrace Marshall Jr. And also Chuba Hubbard, you mentioned. I'm not impressed with the yards he got. It's 14 carries, 41 yards, 2.9 average. That's not going to cut it. But Miles Sanders was even worse, 13 carries, 19 yards. And Miles Sanders, you know how I feel about him. So, yeah, Chuba Hubbard's another person that you can look at on the waiver wire if you're hurting at running back and you just need something. You can get him and spot start him here or there. Yep. Hawkinson cooled down. Justin Jefferson is, letting the league know why he's who he is. And probably in the last thing as we get off this game, Jordan Addison had nothing. He had 1 target. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. No catches, 1 target. That surprised me. I don't expect that every week, but that's what happened. And then, like you said, Cam Akers. Hey, Akers looked good, man. Madison looked good, 17 carries, 95 yards. Still hasn't got a touchdown this year. So if I'm a betting man, I'm putting money on Madison to get in the end zone next week. But Cam Akers looked good, 5 for 40. That's an 8-yard per carry average. So the Vikings get their first win. Those are the guys that you want to look at if you're looking at waiver wire and, adding to your team. Those are some of the guys that we just mentioned right now. The Falcons and Jaguars, that game was in London. And the Falcons, I don't know, man. I don't know if they're just a mess or what, but we had just talked about Arthur Smith not using his players properly. And what's up with Jonnu Smith? 6 targets, 6 receptions, 95 yards. I mean, why wouldn't you throw those 6 targets to Kyle Pitts? Pitts had 4 targets. How is Jonnu Smith out targeting Kyle Pitts? Once again, it's that whole thing. And it's going to cost Arthur Smith and it's going to cost Atlanta because he's about to get in one of my rant videos. Seriously, bro. I'm about to start talking about he needs to get fired and maybe he'll get a fire in his ass and he'll, get his team straight. 23-7. The Jaguars have not impressed me all year long. And they go ahead and they just, pretty much handle their business winning in that game. What was your take on that game?
Yeah, I think just another team with another coaching problem, like we were talking about with Chicago, and yeah, it just seems like their whole play calling is just upside down. Nothing's going right for Atlanta. They have some great players and not really being used. The first game, Algier and Robinson ran for what, over 200 yards, and then we complained about not having a lot of passing game with Atlanta, and then second game they came out and then they passed and they got everybody the ball. But Ritter don't look good at all. He looks way uncomfortable. He doesn't look like he's gelled with the receivers at all, and it seems like that their play calling is for Jonnu Smith. It's not like he's open but it's like they're play calling for him. I watched most of that game, and there's a lot of calls his way. Ritter only had 9 fantasy points, but John Robinson, he had a 100-yard game with 21 fantasy points. Drake London, he had a touchdown, and he had 11 fantasy points, but he only had 3 receptions. He had 7 targets, but nothing too crazy, And and like we said, Jonnu Smith, 15 points. The Jaguars, they handle that game pretty much. I watched that game, and they pretty much did what they had to do to win. Trevor Lawrence had 16 fantasy points. Etienne Jr., he did all right, but he had 10 fantasy points. And Christian Kirk, he got the ball a lot, and he had 12 targets. He had 16
Yeah.
fantasy points. And Calvin Ridley, at first it looked like Ridley was going to go off. At first they were like throwing to him, cut, boom, boom. But then he only had 2 targets. Like all of a sudden they stopped going to him. The first quarter they
Right.
went to him, and it was like, oh, he's having a big game, and then they stopped. But Ridley had 11 fantasy points, and Evan Ingram had 12 fantasy points with 8 targets. So Kirk and Ingram's getting a lot of targets from Lawrence lately.
Yeah. If I'm a Calvin Ridley owner, and I have some Ridley, I'm getting a little nervous.
Yep.
There's a lot of hype about Calvin Ridley and 2 targets. I don't understand. Those are things I just don't get in football, how they can only target. This is supposed to be a stud and a lot of hype about him. He gets only 2 targets. I'm just wondering about that. Christian Kirk, the 12 targets. Yeah, he deserves. He was there last year, and he should get a lot of targets. But they can both get 8 to 10 targets. Ingram got 8 targets. ETN, man, 20 carries, 55 yards, 2.8 average. That ain't going to get it, man. Tank Bisbee was a little better, only 3 carries for 10 yards, 3.3, but that's not going to get it either. So I don't know. Jacksonville's not very impressive this year so far. It looks like they're working through some things, and Atlanta, I think, is going to end up on a big losing skid. But that 2-0 start was all superficial papers junk, and they're going to coach themselves right out of any contention. Let's move on to the Dolphins and Bills. Now, this was supposed to be the high-scoring game. We thought that there would be some fireworks here. There were fireworks, and the fireworks were named Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs because those 2 dudes went off. They did their thing. Allen had 320 yards, passing 4 touchdowns, no INTs. Diggs had only 6 receptions, but 120 yards, 3 touchdowns. That one that he broke 2 tackles and made this Miami's defense look like morons. I felt like Buffalo wanted to show or prove to the NFL that last week was a fluke, that for some reason Denver just didn't feel like playing, and Miami goes off and scores 70. But they had to serve notice. You're not doing that shit at our crib. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
whoop your ass and bring you back down to earth. And if you're having a hangover, oh, well, we don't care. The only thing that I saw out of it, and I'm not worried about Miami, Miami's going to be fine. The only thing that I saw out of that game that really stood out to me is that Devin Achan is for real. I think he's for real. 8 carries, 101 yards, 12.6 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. They're using him in the goal line. They're using him in gadget plays. They're just like I had said last week, he can find a little niche. I think no matter who the starting running back is, he has a niche that he's a gadget player, man, kind of like Tyreek when he was coming up. They want to get the ball in this guy's hands because he's super fast and he reads the holes very well. That's what stood out to me mostly in that game. What was your take on that game?
Buffalo wanted this game and they got it. They wanted that game bad. And I heard a couple of things from Tyreek Hill. We needed that, all that, and maybe they needed to humble themselves. Maybe the locker room got a little cocky, but nobody said anything about that. But Tyreek Hill did come out and say, we needed that. We needed to lose like that. So, sometimes that happens. I mean, you scored 70 points the week before,
Yeah.
and then you come out and you score 20. But the thing is, that Buffalo wanted that game bad. And when Buffalo plays, if they play Cincinnati, they're going to want that game. And you know what I mean? So Buffalo has a couple receipts right now sitting in their locker room. But the Miami game, they wanted that, and they showed up. Josh Allen, that's when he has to show up, and he did. He showed up when he should have showed up in the Jets game, but this Miami game, the guy went off, and that's what we talked about. Talked about that, what we thought was going to happen, and it did. And there was nothing Miami could do. There was nothing. You watch that game, and there was nothing they could do. Just everything was going Buffalo's way. Tua, he had 282 yards. He had 14 fantasy points. Achan, he had some garbage time at the end. He got that extra, I think, that big run that got him down there. He only had 8 rushing attempts, but he had 100 yards. But he had 30 fantasy points. Mostert, 6 fantasy points. For the receivers for Miami was the one that led them was Braxton Berrios with 17 fantasy points, and Tyreek Hill had 10. And the Tynan Smith had 8. And then the Buffalo side, Josh Allen, 39 fantasy points, James Cook, 14, and Stephon Diggs, 39. And Dalton Kincaid led the tight ends with 6.
Yeah. Braxton Berrios, you're going to see him a lot this week and, waiver wire talk and videos and stuff. I'm not buying it.
No.
When you're behind Waddle and Tyreek, I'm not buying into Braxton Berrios. He had a great game, don't get me wrong, but we're not going to put him in our waiver wire targets for week 5. If he makes me eat crow, like we said, we'll let them make us eat crow, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a great game for him. But yeah, I agree. It did look like Buffalo just wanted that game more. We were on Josh Allen and we were on Stephon Diggs. They paid big dividends this week. As a matter of fact, our boy Chris, who's not here, he took 3rd place in the Monster and FanDuel. He won a little bit of change, a little pocket change, a couple grand. And so that was good. He had 10 grand sitting there, and then freaking Puka Nakua.
Mm-hmm.
That last second, touchdown by Puka Nakua dropped him all the way to 3rd place from 1st place. So he was kind of pissed that the 10 grand slipped through his fingers. But we'll get it next week. That was a good game. You're right. Buffalo is carrying some receipts, and they're trying to pay fools back. That is 100%. Broncos and Bears. All right. So this game, last week I went off on their Luke Getsky, and it seems like I'm sure he listens to the podcast. I'm sure he does, because that's why he changed things up, right, bro? He listens to us. He probably hates us, but it's okay. Mm-hmm. But Luke, good job, man. Letting be Justin. Justin Fields, he only had 4 carries for 25 yards, but he was on the move a little more in his passing attempts. they got him loose a little better. They got Khalil Herbert 18 touches for 103 yards. Um, but this game didn't really fix everything for them. They had a good game and they're playing against a real weak defense. And the funny thing is that they still lost 28-31. It's like, man, Cole Kmet, which I will have him in the waiver wire pickups. I think he's worthy of an ad if because tight end is so it's already sketchy as it is in fantasy. If
Mm-hmm.
either you have one of the top ones or you have nothing basically at that position. So if you have Cole Kmet, you can kind of line up match and get him in your lineup depending on who they're playing against. He had a pretty monster game. You'll touch on that in a minute, but 7 for 85 with 2 touchdowns. So and every now and then, that's what Justin Fields does. He goes to his blanket, and this was a blanket game for him. He wanted to go. DJ Moore, I think, got a little banged up in that game, but DJ Moore had a big game, man. 8 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. He's starting to find his place. Finally, I'm seeing the DJ Moore that everyone's been talking about. On the Denver side, really quickly, Jaleel McLaughlin, maybe it's a waiver wire target for week 5. Javante went out with a hip flexor. They said that it's not serious, but he could miss a week. They're expecting him to play next week, but we don't know yet. It's Monday when we're taping this. So Jaleel McLaughlin, he looked pretty good, man. 7 carries, 72 yards. He looked pretty good. Yeah. So what was your take on the game?
Whoever wants to get a breakout game, play Denver.
Right?
Whoever wants to score some points, play Denver. I just can't believe it, man. Denver's defense last year was pretty tough, and then with the kid Surtain back there as a cornerback, and they got some good young players, and it's just they're struggling right now. Russell Wilson, he's been playing not too bad this year. I mean, he didn't have a big yardage game, but he had 3 touchdowns. He had 22 fantasy points. So Russell hasn't been too bad, man. If you need a quarterback because you have a bye, Russell Wilson has not been bad. He's been averaging about 20 points the last couple of weeks, so he hasn't been doing bad at all. Like Lonnie said, Jaleel McLaughlin, he had 19 fantasy points. We'll see what's up with Javante this week, and then Cortland Sutton, he led the receivers with 11. Jerry Jeudy, I thought he was going to have a breakout game this week. He didn't. He only had 5 targets for 3, but 8 fantasy points, nothing too crazy. And they're tight end. He's hurt, so they're cycling through tight ends right now. Justin Fields, 32 fantasy points. Herbert, he finally did something. Like I said, you want to do something, play Denver.
Right.
Pretty much.
Right.
We'll see what they do next week or,
Exactly.
next time they play. So he had 25 fantasy points. DJ Moore, 30 fantasy points. Darnell Mooney, 9. And then Cole Kmet, 27. It's just been every week it's almost there for Cole Kmet. Like he's been getting the targets for Fields. He's been getting the targets for sure. And then this past week, he just finally got the receptions and the yards. So I like Cole Kmet moving forward. Use him.
Yeah.
Like if you're the coaches, look what worked. And they sat home, Chase Claypool, the diva.
Yeah.
They sat him at home, and that's unreal, But now they're 0-4, and I heard a couple things today on the radio, and I heard a couple things on TV. I was watching some all the Monday morning quarterbacks and all that, and there were some known sources saying that Atlanta should go for Justin Fields, and that the Bears, if they keep losing this way, that they have to get rid of Justin Fields. There's no way they're going to be able to keep him, and they don't want him. They really don't think they want him. So, but the big name that I'm hearing right now on the big team is Atlanta.
Well, Arthur Smith don't know what the hell he's doing with Cadillacs and Ferraris and freaking.
No.
He doesn't have a clue. He's got one of the most talented rosters in all of football, and they keep laying eggs because his play calling is shit. So they can just add Justin Fields to that then. Really, I don't think he's going to do any better, not unless he just really wants to just run, Justin, just go ahead and freaking run, So I don't know. You're right. The Bears are still, they're 0-4. Maybe they'll go get Caleb. Maybe they're tanking for Caleb, man. Who knows? Or, maybe they're, for Sanders. You never know.
Well, right now with the Panthers, with the Panthers playing as bad as they are right now, they could be 1-2 to whatever way
Yeah. But
it
they just
falls.
got Bryce Young. They've got to believe in Bryce Young. For them to
Well,
grab a quarterback would surprise me.
the Panthers draft pick goes to Chicago, so that's what I'm saying. So if the Panthers finish last, then it goes to Chicago.
Also, Chicago have the first 2 picks in the
So
draft.
so they're saying that they're look. So that's why they're saying about trading Justin Fields. If they lose, if they go 0-6, they think because Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., 1-2 to
Huh.
Chicago Bears.
And they'd still be shit because their coaches don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, they would have
Okay,
to get a
let's
new
get
coach. They would have to get
right.
it. No, he's fired. He's fired by week 8, dude. By week 6, he's gone.
Yeah,
He's gone.
Eberflus or
Yeah, he is
Eberflus.
gone.
He's a moron too. And
He's
I
gone.
haven't even mentioned him yet this year, but he's a freaking moron for even hiring that offensive coordinator and just for how he's managed the team.
Well, he was
The
supposed to be
Bears
defense,
have,
and then look at their defense.
yeah, the Bears have a lot of problems. Let's not talk about the Bears anymore because
We
they're
always
just
get stuck on
wasting
the Bears.
because they're so horrible. They're wasting my time. It's just they're a poor excuse for a football team. They really are. Baltimore and Cleveland, bro. Baltimore and Cleveland. Now, we
Man.
thought it was going to be smash mouth. We thought it'd be closer than this. But Chubb, I'm finding that Chubb was the answer there. Without Chubb, these guys don't do it. And for all those people that went out and got Jerome Ford and, in those leagues where you have fab and they wasted all their fab on Jerome Ford and guys got him on the waiver wire thinking that they had the RB1 for the rest of just like Chubb. Hell no, they don't. And I'll say it here first. If you have Jerome Ford, you better be worried. If he's your RB1, you better watch out because Pierre Strong outperformed him. Now, I'm not saying Pierre Strong is the answer, but Ford is not. He wasn't the great handcuff we thought. He was perfect in his role behind a superstar, but he's not going to carry that team on the ground, bro. 9 carries, 26 yards, 2.9 a carry, back to back, really subpar weeks for Ford. If he doesn't get that touchdown in the air last week, he has a horrible fantasy week last week.
Mm-hmm.
So, and let's see, what did he do? He did have 6 targets, 5 receptions, but only 19 yards. So even in the passing game, he's not blowing it up. This game was all about Lamar once again trying to take over a game. His numbers aren't great. He only had 186 yards passing, but he had 2 touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown again. Lamar looked good. Gus Edwards played 15 carries. He led the backfield. Not too impressive, 48 yards, but at least he had the carries. And Mark Andrews got involved, 5 receptions, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns, monster game. So I was a little relieved because last week I said, man, if you have Andrews, you're worried. I was worried.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel a little better there. Justice Hill was there getting his thing done, doing his thing just in a complimentary role, 3 for 33. And Melvin Gordon, man, doesn't look that bad. It doesn't look, I'm not saying to go get him, but he's complimenting that backfield, which is really a committee backfield. The Ravens defense looks good and their offense doesn't look like it's hitting on all cylinders yet, but and the receivers really aren't doing anything yet this year. They're not getting the ball to their receivers. But what was your take on that game?
Well, the biggest story was a couple hours before the game, Deshaun Watson was inactive. He was out.
Mm-hmm.
So all week, we all thought Deshaun was going to play, and then so he was out. So that's a big drop for the Browns offense right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, Ford, he only had 9 fantasy points. And Amari Cooper, he's been doing pretty good the last 2-3 games. And then with Watson out, it dropped big time. Big time. Thomas Robinson, he wasn't as sharp as he was in preseason. Preseason, they thought, oh, man, this guy, this and that. I mean, he threw 3 picks against Baltimore. So he wasn't nothing to cheer about, pretty much. So
right.
Amari Cooper only had 2 fantasy points. Elijah Moore only had 2 fantasy points. And those guys were getting a lot of targets the last couple of games. And this game, it dropped big time, And Njoku, he had 10 fantasy points. So he did all right, But Lamar had a good game, he had a good game fantasy-wise. When you look at his stats, don't look good, but his fantasy stats look good. He had 29 points.
Yep.
they're having a hard time with the running game right now. They're trying to figure it out. There's not really one guy that you really could say, I want, unless you really need something, you might pick one. But, Edwards, 6 fantasy points, Melvin Gordon, 5. Zay
Yeah,
Flowers had a slow day. He had 8 fantasy points. And then Mark Andrews had a big game, 25 fantasy points.
yeah. Yeah, so the Ravens move on to 3-1, and the Browns are now 2-2. Ravens look like they're figuring it out as they go, but they keep winning. They lost last week, but they keep winning, which is a good sign for John Harbaugh and the Ravens. Bengals Titans. This game blew me away. Um, I'm just not sure. We said don't start any running back against this Titans defense because they will stop you, and that was clear. Joe Mixon, he did okay though. 14 carries, 67 yards, 4.8 yards per carry, no touchdowns. He had a 13-yard long run. But the Titans defense is good. They're not Dallas flashy and 49er, but they're solid. Just like we said, Vrabel, man, he right, he figures out a way. They're sitting there 2-2, and with
Mhm.
despite Tannehill, who actually did not have a bad game yesterday. He didn't have a great game. He had a touchdown and an interception for 240 yards. And Derrick Henry, they finally just said, hey, this is the King's week. We're going to just feed him the rock. 22 carries, 122 yards, 5.5 a carry, a touchdown. He ran for a 29-yard long one. Spears only had 5 carries for 40 yards, and but he did have a scamper for 22 yards. Now, Derrick Henry, there's a lot of talk and in between coming up to this game that Henry maybe get Spears more touches. You and I even touched on that last week,
Mhm.
and we thought that mixing a little more Spears in couldn't be a bad thing at Henry's age. But it's like Henry and Vrabel wanted to show everyone, no, he's still Derrick Henry. He looked like Derrick Henry. Those numbers are those numbers. Those are like Henry like numbers, 20 plus carries and over 100 yards. On the other side, man, Joe Burrow once again just is stinking up the joint. 165 yards passing, 20 to 30. He must really be injured, man. He has to be because that's just subpar for him. Jamar Chase, 9 targets, which he's getting his targets again. Reception, 73 yards, no touchdown, but that's more like Jamar. You get your targets. T. Higgins got hurt. He may miss some time. They're not sure right now. You were saying that he's on like pain manage. They're going to try and manage and see if he could play or not. So that can open up a waiver wire target of Tyler Boyd in that number 2 because he's the bottom line, the number 2 wide receiver there when Higgins is out, and he gets a lot of love in that scenario. Irv Smith was out, but yeah, man. What was your take, man? I mean, Tennessee just the Bengals once again looking bad.
I'm going to start on the Bengals side. Don't wait too long, you Bengals. Don't wait too long because now you guys are 1-3. Because now
Right.
that division, Cleveland and Baltimore, you got Pittsburgh there too. But don't wait too long. You're going to all of a sudden try to figure it out or sit Burrow or something. I mean, if you're going to sit them, let them rest, sit them now. Because if you wait too long, you're going to end up being 1-5. And then that's pretty much, it's going to be tough for you guys to come back. And it's hard to believe that a Burrow just all of a sudden lost everything because, he signed that contract. He's hurt. He has to be hurt. It's the same team. It's the same offense, I mean, the guy's not just going to just all of a sudden lose it. So I think he's hurt. I think they need to, sit him down a couple games and let him rest because right now the backup can't do no worse, right? I mean, he got
Exactly.
5 fantasy points, Joe Burrow. Joe Mixon, he's not looking too good. I think he needs a little change or something, but 8 fantasy points. Jamar Chase, he tried as hard as he can. He got 14 fantasy points. He had 9 targets. Their tight ends are not doing nothing really crazy. Tannehill, he's playing the Trent Dilfer role right now. He's just doing just to keep the game going. 13 fantasy points. Derrick Henry, he came back and showed everybody, like you said, he showed everybody to shut their mouth pretty much.
Right.
So I guess we'll shut
Right.
our mouth for a week, Derek.
Right.
We'll shut it for 1 week. He had 27 fantasy points. Nick Westbrook, Connie, he had 16. Hopkins 10, and then Josh Wiley, he had 10 fantasy points. Yeah, Tennessee could be, if they just keep playing the way they are, man. It's gonna be a tough division for for those guys. It's for the Jaguars and Tennessee. Tennessee could be right on top again. It's crazy,
Exactly.
and they don't. I mean, they're not flashy at all, but their defense is stout, man.
Yeah.
Their defense is really, really good.
I agree 100%, man. Like we said, Vrabel always seemed to put his team in position. They're contending and they're
Mm-hmm.
about to get in the playoffs. It's always that. You can always count on at the end of the year, oh shit, Tennessee's in first place in the division. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
shock. But um, yeah, you're right. Don't wait on Cincinnati. I even threw out a little fillers on Jamar because I have Jamar in a league and just to see what I can get for him in a trade. Because if Burrow's going to play like this, it directly affects Jamar Chase 100%.
Big time.
So we'll see. All right, Rams Colts 29-23. Very entertaining game. Overtime. Puka Nakua, Kieran Williams 25 carries, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nakua 9 receptions, 163 yards, 1 touchdown. And it was a big one. It was a nail coffin touchdown at the end of the game. And Matt Stafford, 319 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Not bad. Not bad at all. These are two very coming into the season under the radar teams as far as expectation was concerned, but they're very entertaining clubs, man. They're both 2-2 now. On the other side, you have probably the guy, depending on what happens with Nakua, with Cup. Cup is supposed to be back this week. Everything is pointing towards him getting back on the field this week. He's practicing with his team already. So, but Taylor could be back too. They're trying to mend that relationship. They want him to play with Richardson. So, Anthony Richardson, though, man, could be the rookie of the year. Once again, he has a great fantasy day. And I know that doesn't win you rookie of the year, your fantasy. But for us, fantasy, this is what this podcast is about. It's about fantasy football. He's a gold mine. This guy, and I was watching this game, bro. He doesn't throw that bad. He has a weird delivery, but he actually throws well. He seems to be reading defenses well. He's a better passer than what's reported him coming into the league. I think he's catching on very well. He's looking good. Only 11 of 25, which isn't great. 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions though. So he took care of the ball. And then once again, 10 carries, 56 yards, and a touchdown. He's getting in the end zone. Michael Pittman did nothing. 5 targets, 1 reception. Alec Pierce, where's Alec Pierce? He's never around. I mean, And then Drew Ogletree, he had 3 receptions and a touchdown. Mo Ali Cox got in the end zone. Josh Downs, 2 receptions, 34 yards. Kieran Williams looks like he could be a bona fide RB1 in the NFL. If you got him on your fantasy team during the time, you got a solid RB2 and real fringe RB1 right there. What was your take on the game?
I think the Rams kind of shocked. I mean, it shocked me, and it might have shocked some other people. I know it did, and it's just I really thought the Colts were going to handle this game because I just didn't think the Rams were as good as they're playing. I know they played tough against the Niners, and they smoked the Seahawks, but I don't know. I just like for some reason I was like I don't think they're that good. I just think they're just not playing too tough of teams. I know put the Niners beat them, but I was like I don't know, but. Against the Colts, so I thought the Colts were going to handle them, but man, the Rams played good. Nakua, he came back out. They lost to the Bengals. They didn't look good against the Bengals. That's what I'm saying. Like when they played the Bengals last week, they didn't look good at all. And then other defense held Nakua pretty good. But this week, Nakua went off 34 fantasy points. Stafford had a good game, 20. And then Kieran Williams had 30 fantasy points, and Tyler Higbee 11. And then Anthony Richardson, him and C.J. Stroud, they're going to fight for that Rookie of the Year. They're fighting for that Rookie of the Year for sure. I think CJ's up there too for it. So
for sure,
Anthony Richardson looks really good with the team, and he just has to find that receiver that that go-to receiver. We thought it was Michael Pittman Jr., but then this week it was Josh Downs, and he just needs to find that guy that he's comfortable with, because right now they're pretty much flip-flopping every week. But he scored 30 points. Zach Moss had a slow game. He had 70 yards, but he had 9 fantasy points, and Josh Downs had 5. And their tight end Ogletree had 13, and Mo Alley Cox had 10. So today, their coach came out and said that the practice window for Jonathan Taylor is Wednesday, and that he is practicing Wednesday. I don't know. I mean, we just heard from Jonathan Taylor on Saturday saying, I am not playing for the Colts. So I don't know. So today it was a big thing on the bottom of the headliner this morning on ESPN saying that the practice Wednesday, a window is Wednesday, and that he's practicing Wednesday. So we'll see. But what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that game really had 2 superstars in it that weren't there, that are to be rejoining their teams in week 5, that can really, if you have one or both of those guys and they do play, it could change your whole fantasy season. It really can help you out, because that's, especially like me, I have both of them and they're both just sitting there. My goal was to get through the first 4 weeks, at least 500, and that ain't happened. That did not happen with the way this season. So I got a lot of work to do to get back, get my team back. But both of those guys should be coming back for me. I just, yeah. I think Taylor, if he is really about football, you gotta want to play with Richardson at least a year, see what happens, because they could have something special, man. Those 2 guys, and then I think Pittman, just to piggyback on something you said. I think Pittman is the guy. He just had a bad game. Still, for Richardson, as far as that blanket you were referring to, I think Pittman is still that guy. He just had a bad game, bro. I don't understand that one, though. I didn't understand it. 1 reception. I mean, he'd been getting 11, 12 targets a game. So, weird game. Maybe the Rams just D'd him up. You had Aaron Donald coming through there. That's tough. Okay, now this next game, man, they're 3-1. The Bucks are 3-1. Whoa, Baker Mayfield, baby. Maybe, because I've been a little hard on him. I've been a non-believer, 100%. I'm a non-believer with the Saints too. They're 2-2. I don't. Derek Carr with his shoulder, but I wasn't impressed with them having Derek Carr to begin with. But Baker Mayfield, man, looks like he's really getting a little resurgence to his career. He looks like he has something to prove. And, he reminds me of those guys that played for a long time in the league, and it finally started clicking, and as they got older, they just started being good, real serviceable. And to me, that's Baker right now, man. Always had a great attitude, always a great teammate, funny on the commercials, He's 25 of 32, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Man, stellar job. Rashad White, though, on the other hand, 15 carries, 56 yards, 3.7 yards per carry. There's a lot of hype about him coming in, and he still has yet to show me, why there was so much hype about him. And then Godwin finally got some targets, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 114 yards. He finally had a decent game, no touchdowns, but that's because Mike Evans got hurt, pulled up hurt, and Latimer was on Evans the whole game. It opened up Godwin. But I'm not too surprised about this game. Alvin Kamara looked decent in his return. 11 carries, 51 yards. But the thing about Kamara is he had 14 targets.
Crazy.
13 receptions, man. That's 90.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But this is the crazier part. 33 yards.
Yeah.
Hey, Jake, we say this a lot, right? We say this a lot. Bro, I could have went out there and got 33, little 50 yards on 13 receptions.
They were just dump offs, man. Well, you could tell. Hey, just like we talked about, Carr's arm. His arm was messed up.
So your take on this game?
But I'll start off with Carr right now. He didn't look good at all, and to me, like we talked about it last week. The Saints are not. They don't look too great to me either. And Derek Carr, with him hurt, he had 127 passing yards. He had 4 fantasy points. And Kamara, 13 receptions. That's crazy. And we thought so. We even said, that they're going to bring him in and just go to him. He had 21 fantasy points, but like the big one was Chris Olave. one
Yep.
fantasy point,
One
one,
reception, four
and one
targets. Like
reception, 4 yards, 6 targets.
now, do you think that that's because of Carr's shoulder? They couldn't stretch the field, so they're dumping
I,
it. Why wouldn't you
yeah,
just bring Jameis Winston in
I
then?
know. I don't get that. See, that's what I don't get. Like, what's the point to even push Carr? He hasn't done nothing all year to make you say, "Oh, yeah." He has done nothing. He had one 300
Nothing.
yard game, but it was nothing crazy, man. It's like he hasn't. Olave's been going off every game because
Yep.
he can stretch the field. Well, when you can't throw to him, Michael Thomas had 9 fantasy points. Jimmy Grant, none of their tight ends scored any fantasy points. Baker Mayfield, he's resurging, man. He
Yeah.
does have 2 great receivers. He does have a
Yeah.
top 5 receiver with Mike Evans, but now Mike Evans, he always has that soft tissue injury, man. His hamstring, he always always has a problem. So hopefully he can come back this week. But Godwin had 22 fantasy points. Evan Tompkins had 15, and Rashad White had 10 fantasy points, and Cade Otton had 10.
Yeah. Kate Otten, just to, touch on their tight end real quick, he can get you 10 points. He can get you. So, I don't know. If you had to get a tight end and you don't have one, you could stream him every now and then. Matchup base for sure. Head coach Todd Bowles said Monday that Evans tweaked his hamstring during Sunday's game, but didn't provide any further update. So that's what we had. That was about 11 hours ago from the time that we're filming this podcast. So yeah, you're right. He always gets hurt. Those soft tissue injuries for him, and so we'll see. Hopefully, he doesn't miss much time. The next game was a lot more competitive than I thought it was going to be, but once again, we've said this about them all year. They don't even know, they haven't even found themselves in their freaking 3-0. Now they're 4-0. These Eagles just keep winning, figuring out ways to win. The Eagles are a perfect example of talent wins out at the end. Close games, the more talented teams usually going to squeak that one out. And that's what happened this week. The Commanders were giving them all they can handle. Chase Young and Sweat, Montez Sweat, those dudes are bad, bro. They're bad. They wreak havoc. They really do. They cause a lot of problems. Obviously, Philadelphia still scored 34 points, but Jalen Hurts, 319 yards, 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Swift came back down to earth, 14 carries, only 56 yards, but he did get in the end zone. Hurts ran 9 times for 34 yards. And Gainwell, I get tired every year of people jumping on Philadelphia running backs. And I get in debates and arguments with people all the time because to me, none of them are any good, ever. This is the best one they have had in a long time is DeAndre Swift. Swift is, if he stays healthy, he's going to be pretty much a consistent guy you can run out there every week. But Gainwell, man, he'll have a game every now and then. And then you'll hear all the shows and stuff. Oh, go get Kenneth Gainwell. Go get him. Blah, 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 blah. They did the same thing with Miles Sanders for all those years, bro. They're all trash to me. Gainwell's just a little gadget guy. He's not a running back. He's a little guy who gets every now and then he breaks something out. I would never have Gainwell on my team. Draft him or pick him up on the waivers. None of that. He's just, to me, it's a waste of a pick. So that's how I feel about Gainwell. A.J. Brown had a big game, 2 touchdowns. He got it done. Devonta Smith, he had another good game. Dallas Goedert, we thought Dallas Goedert was going to get going, and he's not got going. He just has not got going yet this year. So maybe you might be worried about that if you have him as a tight end. McLaurin looked good, 8 receptions, 86 yards, but he didn't find the end zone. Jahan Dotson is the only wide receiver from Washington that got in the end zone, 4 for 27, and he did have a touchdown. Brian Robinson, 14 carries, 45 yards. He got in the end zone. He looked, okay. Sam Howell, though, 6 rushes for 40 yards. That was kind of impressive. 290 yards passing, a touchdown, no turnovers. What was your take?
A Philly squeeze one out again. They didn't. They handle the game pretty much until the end, but they're not playing, the perfect ball yet, and that's scary. Once they start, the talk is, once they start playing the way they know how to play, it's going to be scary. So, Washington, I wish they would have, snuck that one in. That would have been, they almost had it. The thing with Goddard is, I think maybe because Philly's having a run game right now, their run game's working, and they don't have to just look for Goddard the whole time, because when they have a run game, they don't have to worry about those little dump offs to Goddard and those little 5-10 yard passes either. So
Right.
I think because that's working right now, maybe they're not using him as much. But I mean, he's a solid tight end, and I'm surprised they're not either. But Jalen
Yes.
Hurts had a good fantasy game with 27. Swift had a 17-point fantasy game, and then AJ Brown went off. He won a lot of guys, some tourneys with 41 fantasy points.
Yep.
Devontae Smith 14 fantasy points, and Dallas Goedert 4. Sam Howell had 19 fantasy points. Brian Robinson, I thought he had a lot more stats, the better stats, and I'm looking at it now. It wasn't that great. 45 rushing yards.
No.
I thought he did a lot better, but
Yeah.
he scored at the end there, so he had 13 fantasy points. Terry McLaurin had a nice solid game with 22, and Curtis Samuel he had 18, and Jahan Dotson had 12.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Philly, once again, just squeaks one out and they just keep rolling 4-0. One of the only two undefeated teams left in the NFL, unless I'm missing a team. I don't know who that other team is, though. I think we'll talk about them a little later. Anywho,
Mm.
next game, Houston and Pittsburgh. We were on this game. We called this game. We knew what was going to happen in this game because Pittsburgh can't score. Pittsburgh has no offense, and their defense ain't great either. So you put those two things together, you're going to get a big L. Pickett got hurt, so I get that. Trubisky comes in, and he's a liability, man. I'm not going to say what I was just thinking of saying. It had something to do with if you ever played in Chicago. But anyway, Pickett, he got hurt, and Trubisky's not the answer. Um, you brought to my attention that Pat Fryermuth is out, and so he got hurt, and he was out. Uh, yeah, this game, I think Houston is better than we think. And remember, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and I said, D'Amico Ryans, I I thought that he's a talented coach, and he's a good locker room guy. X's and O's on the defensive side of the ball. He's got this young stud quarterback in CJ Stroud who just does not make mistakes. And he's got these two up and coming wide receivers. And I said, I think he's a good coach and he's going to surprise some people. Bro, he's surprising people. I think D'Amico is a huge reason why, you know, they're 2-2 right now and looking pretty good. Now, yeah, they beat the Steelers. That's not saying much, but Steelers came in 2-1. Houston was 1-2. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
um, I think that Houston is on the up. They're coming up. Fryermuth is scheduled to get imaging on his hamstring on Monday. So he got a MRI probably today. So we'll know a little bit more about Fryermuth and his availability as the week goes on. And there's nothing behind him. So don't run out to the waiver wire and pick up his backup.
No,
That's not going to
no.
help you out at all because that offense is abysmal. But CJ Stroud, you know, doing his thing. This week it was the Nico Collins show. Last week it was the Tank Dell show. Next week it'll probably be the Tank Dell show. They, you know, go back and forth with those two young guys. Damian Pierce had a more decent game, 24 carries, 81 yards, only 3.4. That's not great, but they got him the rock to try to establish that run a little better. What was your take?
Yeah, Pittsburgh's record does not show who they really are. It, like we talked about, they should be an
Yep.
0-4 team. I really believe in they should be an 0-4 team. And I don't know. I have a hard time talking about Pittsburgh every week. I do not think they're a great team at all. I'm sorry. I mean, their defense, they have a good line. Their linebackers are great. You got Fitzpatrick in the back, but TJ Watt, Highsmith, linebacker, Ken Havers, he's out, but they should be 0-4, man. And it just sucks because there's other teams that they played them and they just with the whole Chubb thing, he got hurt and the Raiders is just they're walking backwards right now. The Raiders are so yeah, it's just tough. Houston, yeah, we talked about it. Houston defense is looking sharper every week. and their offense is just getting better. Like you said,
Yep.
1 week's the Dell show, 1 week's the Collins show, and it's kind of hard to pick. I have Nico Collins, and it's like, oh, and I said him, and
Right.
then he blows it up. So, I'm glad Pittsburgh. I'm glad Pittsburgh lost. I'm glad Houston beat them. That's the thing. I'm glad that Houston's looking better.
Tell us how you really feel.
I'm glad D'Amico Ryans has that team playing tough. I'm glad that he
Right.
has that defense playing tough. It's not about Pittsburgh. It's about Houston to me right
Yeah.
now. I like how they have Houston playing. And C.J. Stroud got 24 points. Damian Pierce 11. Devin Singletary 8 fantasy points. Nico Collins went off with 38 fantasy points, and Robert Woods was with 5. And Dalton Schultz, he had a touchdown, and he had 13 fantasy points. Kenny Pickett 4 fantasy points. Jalen Warren and Najee, they pretty much split it. They had 11 each. And the receiving core, Calvin Austin with 5 and Pickens with 5. And that's pretty much it with them.
Yeah. All in all, I think Houston is a good young team, and they have a lot to be excited about over there. I love those candy red uniforms that they had on, those hats, man. Those helmets are sharp, bro.
Sick.
I love
You're sick.
those uniforms
clean.
are nice, very clean. Next game, Raiders and the Chargers. The Raiders. The story here is one man just destroying his old team, bro. Khalil Mack just came in like the old Khalil Miggity Mack, and he 6 sacks, bro. He had that poor young quarterback O'Donnell.
O'Connell on the
O'Connell,
back.
yeah, bro. Poor O'Connell, man. Hey, welcome to the NFL, kid. Here's Khalil Mack over here. Let me introduce you. Once again, Josh Jacobs, 17 carries, only 58 yards. Not good, man. The trouble in Vegas with that. O'Connell, he had 238 yards passing, interception, no touchdowns. Had so many hurries. He was sacked 6 times. Kind of crazy there. Devonta went out of the game. It looked like he was going to be out, but he came back and returned, so that was good. 8 receptions for 75 yards. He's still unstoppable. It doesn't matter who's quarterbacking, I guess. He didn't get a touchdown, but 8 for 75, 9.4 per reception. Devonta Adams is just a stud, man, and a great football player. There ain't nothing you could do. If he's out there, he's getting his. On the other side, though, Big Mike Williams was gone, and we're all wondering, is Quentin Johnson going to get a bigger role, bigger piece of this pie? The answer is no. 3 targets, 1 reception. Keenan Allen, he only had 5 targets, 3 receptions. Josh Palmer, 8 targets, 3 receptions. So it looked like this was more of a rushing game. Herbert had 12 carries for 27 yards, which is kind of funny. And Joshua Kelly, 17 carries, 65 yards. He finally looked better, but he still isn't the answer, This was kind of a smash mouth, old school Raider Charger game. There's a few fights. I mean, they hit Herbert late out, and there's an ex teammate too of Herbert's, which is kind of, that's come on, bro.
Yeah, Tillery. Yep.
Yeah, come on, Tilly. What's really going on?
Yeah.
And they kicked him out of the game for that. And the kind of benches cleared a couple times with these two teams. So we'll see how they play against each other next time. But an entertaining game. We were on it. We both had the Chargers in this one. What was your take?
First quarter, I thought it was going to be a high fantasy game for the Chargers side. It was going to be like that. Herbert was just slinging the rock, and they were just. I thought it was going to be a pretty big score. I thought it was going to be in the 30s, for the Chargers, and it kind of calmed down itself. There was a lot of 3 and outs, and after halftime, about the third quarter, it was kind of going both ways, and the Raiders were just slowly coming back, and they almost did at the end. He threw that pick at the 20-yard line, so they almost tied the game. So, Herbert, he scored 24 fantasy points, but he only had 167 yards passing. But he had 2 rushing TDs. So, it wasn't a flashy game for the Chargers, but if you watch the game, they pretty much handled the Raiders. They handled them. They really did. They could have easily blown them out. I really thought it was going to be a blowout. Joshua Kelly, he's still nothing, and hopefully Eckler comes back. But he had 6 fantasy points. Keenan Allen had 12. Joshua Palmer had 10. Parham, he went out with an injury, so he never really had He never really touched the ball. Everett had 2 fantasy points. O'Connell, he had 12 fantasy points. Josh Jacobs had 27 fantasy points. He had eight receptions, 81 yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. So he had 27 fantasy points, and Avante Adams had 15, and Jacoby Myers had 5.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah, you summed it up well, man. Chargers go on to be 2-2 now. They start off 0-2. They've won their last 2 games, and that's a good thing for them. Dallas, New England. We were so on this game. We were so money on this game, and we had a good week, bro. When you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
had a good week as far as getting out really solid information to everyone out there who's playing fantasy football. If they listened to us last week, they were getting fed some really good intel, and I hope that it helped them throughout the week. We said, if you're playing DFS, yeah, this might be Captain Obvious, but go out and get that Dallas defense. That Dallas defense, we said they're good. We felt, I think I may have to find the clip, but it was something like Dallas is going to whoop their ass.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we said. And boy, Mac Jones looked horrible. They benched him and brought in Zappy, and then Bill. Yeah, we're off to Cincinnati, y'all. Bill said that he came out and said that Mac Jones is going to be is still his starter. Yeah, great, Bill. Awesome. Stevenson, 14 carries, 30 yards. Zeke had to been like, I don't even want to play in this damn game. I know that defense over there. This ain't a revenge game. They're going to whoop my ass. Yeah. 6 carries, 16 yards. They made Zeke look old, like he is. He's getting old. Mac Jones scurried around 3 for 7. And on the other side, the Pollard, 11 carries, 47 yards. Not very eventful game. Jake Ferguson, though, we've been talking about Jake Ferguson for a few weeks now. Mm-hmm. And he will be in the waiver wire for week 5 pickups. You got to go get Jake Ferguson. 7 receptions, 77 yards on 7 targets. And he gets a lot of targets in the red zone. So Jake Ferguson is a solid tight end pickup. I'm not saying you could play and start him every week, but matchup based, he's a if you don't have a tight end and he's available, get Jake Ferguson. And your favorite player in the NFL, Dak Prescott, 28 of 34, 261 yards, 1 touchdown. But the story here was their defense. Their defense just destroyed them. Dallas's offense didn't look that great because the Patriots have a good defense too. But boy, that Dallas defense had something to prove, and they certainly proved it. Now they get I don't know, next week will probably be an easy game for them. They'll probably bring in their number 1 rated team in the NFL and their number 1 rated defense and probably knock the shit out of the team they're going to play. But we'll talk about them in a little bit. What was your take on this game?
Yeah, Dallas's offense, they didn't really have to do anything. Like we said, they didn't have to. Their defense took control of that game from the beginning. And, Dak didn't really do nothing flashy. 14 fantasy points. Tony Pollard, 9. CeeDee Lamb had 14 fantasy points. Michael Gallup, 11. And Jake Ferguson, 14. Yeah, Dallas didn't have to do they didn't have to do too much on offense. They really didn't. Maybe they just played to what their defense was doing and just let them manage the game. Pretty much that's what it seems like. So the Patriots, they awful. And I'm surprised about Ramondre Stevenson. I thought he was going to be a lot better this year.
Yeah.
I know they had a tough defense, but last week he didn't do too good. The week before he didn't look too good. So maybe it changes coming up. But yeah, Mac Jones, awful.
Yeah.
He was just throwing the ball. He was just throwing it up there, just hoping somebody caught it. He didn't care if it was Dallas. He didn't care if it was New England. He was
right.
Just don't touch the ground. Don't let it touch the ground. That's what it seemed like. It was crazy, man. It was pretty bad.
You look good, man. It was. Let me ask you something though, because there was a debate for years since Tom Brady left. Was it Brady or was it Belichick? Bro, man. I'm starting to think it's Brady, bro, because Brady went off and took a team out of the grave and won a Super Bowl with the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So Belichick didn't do anything before he had Tom Brady. Nothing. His career was just subpar. He wasn't a great coach. No one thought he was great, but he comes to New England, He had a little stint in New York. He had a stint in Cleveland. Nothing great. He comes to New England, gets this kid, and all of a sudden they just start coming together. Now, yeah, great defenses and all this and that. And yes, he does that. But they looked like a bad team, man,
Yeah.
all the way around. They're
I'm
no
just hoping it's
offense.
yeah, I'm just hoping it's because he's washed up. He's old. No, I mean I'm hoping it's just time that it's just his time to go. You know what I mean? Because it
Yeah,
gets to the
yeah,
point that you're just done and you're not putting your
yeah.
full time into it, and you're just
And
you know what I mean?
yeah,
That's what I'm hoping.
I think too, as far as him, because he lives, eats, and drinks and breathes football, but I think his way of coaching doesn't resonate with this way of player.
No.
These players nowadays, man, are different. You
Mhm.
know, a lot of these millennials out here, a lot of different, types
Well,
of beliefs and,
yeah, New England still plays the whole thing. They don't believe paying one guy $200-300 million, and they still didn't.
no.
They still didn't with Tom Brady. Like
Yeah.
Tom took pay cuts and all that so they get other players. But in this team, there's not really a big money contract guy right now on the team. But you're right though. The times are changing, and Belichick's probably not. And I think this is his last year coaching for New England. I mean, I think it's his last year coaching. Period. You would think it would be. And
Yeah.
and it's just it's showing a lot on the field. I mean, they went and got Bill O'Brien. They thought, they went and got him back. Thought that was going to help Mac Jones. That ain't helping nothing. Mac Jones
No.
looks 5 times worse than he did last year. Like he looks
Yeah.
awful. Like it
He
looks really
does.
bad. So I mean, there's not really nothing to talk about on fantasy wise on the New England side. Hunter Henry scored 9 points, and that was the highest score
Yeah.
for New England.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, we may be coming to the close of a great run
Mhm.
in NFL history, but Belichick does not look the same. And you might be right; he may step down at the end of the year, or he might just be too damn stubborn and never quit. He may die on the sidelines. Who knows? Who knows? All right, the next game. This is a game that, hey, at first I ain't gonna lie, I thought, hey, we might have a little contest here. Cardinals Niners. Niners won it handedly, but the Cardinals showed they're way better than people gave them credit for. Even to make this a competitive first half or quarter, however, they look like they look like they want to play football. They really do. The Cardinals are not just coming in expecting to get blown out. They look like a team expecting to win every Sunday. And, they've only won one, but they've played well in all four of their games this year. Josh Dobbs playing against that stout defense. He didn't look horrible, man. He's, 28 of 41, 265 yards and two touchdowns, no interceptions. That's not bad at all, man. Joshua Dobbs, it could be a waiver wire target if you're looking for a quarterback to spot start or you need a backup quarterback for some bye weeks. He could be. James Conner, 11 for 52, not bad. So I just think that the Cardinals are better than people think. Marquise Brown, we said a couple weeks ago, Marquise Brown, it might be a good time to buy on him. You know, he's kind of under
Mhm.
the radar, and he's not a bad receiver at all. But Michael Wilson has really been ascending. You brought him to my attention, I think it was last week but yeah, man, this guy, 7 targets, 7 receptions, 76 yards against a tough defense. It's not like he's doing this against, the Bears. I shouldn't have said that. Or, okay, the Broncos or the Vikings, right? Any of those teams. He did against a tough Niner defense. But once again, the Niners just show why they are the class of the NFC right now. And I have to say they're the class of the NFC, even though Philly fans, I know you're going to be mad at me for saying that, but your team is still figuring it out. Philly, you guys are figuring it out and you're 4-0 and that's awesome. The Niners look like they have their shit figured out. They look like they know who they are. They know their identity. Their identity is on both sides of the ball, defense and offense. And Christian McCaffrey, hands down, the stud of the league, period. He's just the best player in football, I think, right now. If he stays healthy all year, look out. And I was razzing you about Dallas coming in next week or them going. I don't know where they're going to play, but they're playing next week. And I think that the Niners are going to really show the Cowboys up. It should be a good defensive battle, but I don't want to get too much into that game. We'll do that in the previews for next week. But the Niners look like the class of the NFL right now. They really do. Brock Purdy, 283 yards, a touchdown, just doing what he needs to do, man. He'll make a big play if he has to. If he doesn't have to, he's just doing what he needs to do, using McCaffrey and Debo, all those. Ayuk got back on it again. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 148 yards. He didn't get in the end zone, but man, that's a good stat line right there.
Mm-hmm.
McCaffrey had 7 receptions on 8 targets for 71 yards. And little Ray McLeod, he was kind of getting in there for a couple of receptions and 22
Mm-hmm.
yards. So they're spreading it around, and they're really, to me, the class. Kittle, subpar week, only 1 reception. What was your take on that game?
Yeah, I think the Cardinals are a good coached team. I think this new coach Gannon, I think he has a lot of good schemes. It's just the way they play in the first half. It's like they scheme up good all week. They have a good. I mean, their playbook is just right on all week, for their games. And it seems like at the halftime, the other team they're playing is just too good, and they change it up. They have personnel to change, and they don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like there's more talent on the other side to cheat up. And the Cardinals, I said all week was the Niners have to stop James Conner, and they did. He didn't do nothing flashy.
Yeah.
He had a big run here and there, but he had 6 fantasy points. He had 50 yards. He didn't do anything. He got all in the game and slammed Hufanga to him and slapped him in the face for no reason. For what? Because they stuffed you? Like, I don't get it. Like, dude, they beat you. Like the Niners should have beat you up worse than it really happened. And it was pissing me off that, like, you let Michael Wilson, like you're leaving these guys wide open. Like, Niners are having issues in the middle right now. 10, 15 yards, they're having a big issue with just leaving guys wide open. Marquise Brown, Wilson. So Niners are having a hole on defense. Dallas, they could do something there, but the Niners are having a big problem at some things on defense. I've seen a big hole there. Nick Bosa hasn't started doing anything really big yet. He's still, he missed the whole thing. And Joshua Dobbs, he did all right. Did all right. Fantasy wise, 23 points. James Conner 6. Michael Wilson had 26 fantasy points, and Marquise Brown 16, and Zach Ertz had 11. Zach Purdy, or Brock Purdy, he's looking better every week. I mean, some of the throws that he makes, like right in the tight areas, tight windows, are looking really good. And just keep growing for that kid. Just keep growing. He had 21 fantasy points. Chris McCaffrey had 51 fantasy points. Crazy. And Brandon Ayuk had a big game, 23 fantasy points, and George Kittle had a slow game with 1.
Yeah. McCaffrey, I'm in this FanDuel league where everyone puts in a few bucks, and the winner take all. Second place, they don't have to pay, and I finished second. Our boy Chris, finished first in that league this week. But I had McCaffrey, man. I was like in 8th place, and I had McCaffrey and the Dallas defense, and I went all the way to second and stayed at second, So, yeah, McCaffrey, monster game. Love watching him play, man. He'd be one of my favorite players right now. Him and Jefferson to watch when they're getting down. It's just something special about those two guys. You know what I'm saying? So, another big win as expected by the Niners. They got it done at home like they were supposed to. The last game on the Sunday slate, they wrapped it up with the Chiefs-Jets. Very entertaining game. A lot more entertaining than we thought. And look, I've been saying this ever since Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Zach Wilson isn't that bad. I mean, I know he's had some bad games. It could just be a mental thing. I mean, no one wanted you. They go out and get the Hall of Famer. No one wanted you. And now all of a sudden, 5 plays in, you're thrust into it. And they expect you to be great all of a sudden, getting murdered in the media. Even Chris Collinsworth, man, which I'm kind of getting tired of Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth. That Zach Wilson missed a pass on the sideline. I just want to say Aaron Rodgers would have made that play. Who cares? Wouldn't have, because he can't stay on the field. Zach's out there playing. So stop bringing up Aaron Rodgers. They don't need clicks anymore about Rodgers. They're showing him up in the thing. I could see that. Yeah, show him up there with his foot up and shit. Yeah, but give this kid some support, man. He just needs, and it looks like his team was rallying around him last night, like keeping him pumped up, and like they want him to know that they believe in. But what the hell, Salah doing? I mean, seriously, bro. Maybe you're right. Maybe last week you were onto something. You asked me. You stopped me in the middle a little, and you were like, "Hey, you think this is Salah's last? If he does he get fired? Freak, man. Maybe he does. You got Brees Hall, and you run him out there 6 carries. He gets you 56 yards, 9.3 average, and you only run him out there 6 times. You're running Dalvin Cook 5 times for 16 yards. What are you doing? If you think your quarterback isn't the great, they threw the ball times. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe he was like, "Hey, Zach, we want you to. We're just gonna let you air it out, get the butterflies out, get going, get it to Garrett Wilson, who had a good game. Nine. Well, he had a good game as far as receptions. 9 receptions, only 60 yards. Didn't get in the end zone. Lazard 3 for 61, got a touchdown. And on the other side, Patrick Mahomes is going to be Patrick Mahomes. He had a horrible game though for Patrick Mahomes standards. 18 to 30, 203 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. That Jets defense is good. That's why Salah,
Yeah, they
and we
finally.
did, yeah, they did. And we did say, you don't have to be a great quarterback with this defense. You just have to manage the game well. And that's what he did last night. Zach Wilson, they lost 20 to 23, but it was very entertaining. What stood out to me in this game, though, above all that, I know I just did my rant on Zach Wilson, but Pacheco finally, against a real stout defense, man, 20 carries, 115 yards. He looked good. And so Mahomes ran a little more, 7 carries for 51 yards. But, Kelsey, 6 receptions, 60 yards, vintage, Kelsey. That's what he does. Other than Kelsey, they don't have a receiver. They really don't. And I don't care who's up in the booth. It doesn't matter who's watching you up there. They got out of this by the skin of their teeth, and they were lucky to come away 3-1 in this game because the Jets, they were down 17-0, man, and made this a game, and they only lose by 3 points. The Chiefs defense looked pretty decent too. They did. But I don't know what Salah's doing on the offensive side. What was your take?
Now, yeah, the Jets defense, they showed up, for this game. I mean, they showed up this game. They did, against a, tough quarterback. Yeah, Mahomes didn't look great at all. They had him on his heels a lot, most of the game. Yeah, they scored 17 points quick and a quarter and a half. And it was like, oh, here we go. But yeah, Zach Wilson didn't have a bad game, not too bad. They passed, 39 passes, but just like you said, yeah, what are you doing, Salah? Brees Hall, 6 carries, 50-something yards. Like, why stop? That gets
Right.
your passing game going and going. Like, you want to pass, but why? He's running. I mean, he's running down their throat. Like, why stop that? And the thing I say that, I mean, the reason I asked you last week is because one guy should not stop the whole season. One guy
Exactly.
should not ruin the whole season. Yeah, I know he's Aaron Rodgers, but who knows what he would have did this year?
Right.
Really, who knows what Aaron Rodgers would have did this year? He didn't do nothing with Green Bay last year. So
Right.
pretty much, Robert Saleh, it's your job to have this team ready with Aaron Rodgers or not Aaron Rodgers, and it's not happening. Zach Wilson, he did everything he can to win that game yesterday. That kid did everything he can, but Robert Saleh, you didn't. You should have ran Brees Hall a lot more, man. Like everybody's saying it too. I mean, everybody's like, "Whoa, what?" I mean, it's just really, I don't know. I mean, their defense played really good, but the Chiefs side of the ball, their fantasy score is not too crazy. Patrick Mahomes 15, Pacheco he came out. I mean, he came out 27 points. Receiver was Rashee Weiss with 6, and Travis Kelce had 12. Zach Wilson he had 20 fantasy points. Brees Hall 9. Yeah, it's just crazy. I'm looking at 6 rushing attempts. Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And 1 rushing attempt, Michael Carter, 5 by Dalvin Cook. Alan Lazard had 15 points. Garrett Wilson had 15, and Tyler Conklin 9. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's really going to be eyes on Robert Saleh instead of Wilson from now on.
Mm-hmm.
I think Robert Saleh needs to he needs to do something different because I don't think we'll be here next year with the Jets.
No, I agree, man. What's going on with these coaches in the NFL that have all these really talented players? And I know we don't see everything behind the curtain. So Brees Hall, maybe they have him on a pitch count because he is coming back from a season-ending injury last year, tearing his ACL. I get it, but this guy, you got to give him the rock. Don't have him out there then. If you're only going to run him 6 times, why even have him out there?
Exactly.
You know, he can get hurt on one of those 6 plays. Let him run the damn ball. And you got this moron Arthur Smith in Atlanta, all these just world-class athletes, and he's giving it to the guy, Jonnu Smith, who's been in the league and never been anything he's a tight end 2, 3,
He coached Jonnu with Tennessee.
Yeah. So that's his boy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so he's not using his team right, and their record is reflecting it. Saleh is starting to do that now on the offensive side with the Jets. Give Brees Hall the ball, right? And then you have the other moron in Chicago, and we've been down that road so many times. But what's up with these coaches not using their players the right way? Why have all this talent and you're just not going to use them? And the one that you think is the weakest link, you're going to throw 40 times, Zach. Go ahead, buddy. But you're going to talk mess about him all week long. I mean, I know Saleh isn't, but I don't know, man. I don't get it. The NFL's kind of crazy this year. We've been seeing it. Mike McDaniel, that guy's, an offensive guru. He knows how to use his talent, bro. Mike McDaniel knows how to use his talent, but not too many. Shanahan knows how to use his talent. Kevin O'Connell knows how to use his talent. And I'm not saying that because that's, I'm a Viking fan or you're a Niner fan. That's just proven these offenses are rolling, in Buffalo, they know how to use their talent.
Sean McVay from the Rams right now. Look what he's doing right now without Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, exactly. Sean McVay. Finding the players, getting it to the right players, exploiting defenses. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, man. It's kind of crazy. On to our last game, and it was the Monday night game. Quite frankly, it's boring to me. I mean, the story here, Seattle's defense or Daniel Jones's mistakes. I don't know. We could put them both together. But it wasn't very entertaining, man. I think Dable had his little year last year, and I remember posting a video, a Dable for 4-1 or something like that, and it was all I do is win, no matter. They had just won in the locker room, jumping around, dancing with his team, having a good time. Yeah, that's cool. But shit, this is the NFL. Things get real quick, and Dable has not done a very good job with the Giants this year. On the off season, I don't think they did a great job either shoring up that team. They went and got, the tight end, but Darren Waller, he was kind of already fringe washed up. He's looking a little better this year, but nothing great. Not much to report here other than we called Kenneth Walker III a touchdown magnet. We said, if he's down by the end zone, he's going to get in. And again, he proved us right. Got another touchdown right down around the goal line. 17 carries, 79 yards. Geno Smith had got hurt, but he left with a tweak, but he was back. Drew Lock looked horrible the couple plays he was out there. Carroll was trying to pump him up and everything. He looked pretty bad. And Charbonnet, 5 carries, 31 yards. The Seahawks, somehow they manage, man. They're 3-1. Maybe it's scheduled or whatever, but they're 3-1. And then the Giants, they're 1-3. What was your take on that game?
Yeah, it was sloppy to me. It was a sloppy game. Seattle had 11 sacks. They sacked Daniel Jones 11 times.
Wow.
2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, 1 touchdown for defense. Yeah, it was. The Giants are, last year the biggest thing for the Giants was they were finding ways to win. This year they're finding ways to lose. they are finding ways to lose. It's like you were saying last year. The Vikings. What was their stat with the Vikings last year? They won how many one-score games last year, Lonnie?
11.
And then this
It,
year they lost 3
the,
one-score games already. Right, the
yep.
Vikings did.
Yep.
So it's kind of like the Giants. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Vikings are playing way better than the Giants. Way better. I'm just kind of compare. Like last year, the Giants, they found ways to win. This year, they're finding ways to lose, and they do not look good at all. And how can you go through a offseason and not go get a receiver? How can you not go trade for Hopkins? How can you not go get Hopkins? One, you didn't trade for him. Okay. Then he went for agent, and you didn't even sign him. You have nobody in the receiving core, man. Nobody. You draft Hyatt. And then you don't even play him. I mean, you pick him up in the third, fourth round. You don't even play him. You play him one game. He had some nice plays, and you don't even give him nothing. I mean, you guys, old man Sterling Shepard. I mean, come on, man. Slayton. It's like you didn't do anything to make that offense better. You didn't go get a backup running back for a Barkley. Barkley's hurt almost every year. I mean, last year he wasn't hurt. So, yeah, I can see the Giants having a bad season. And it's just getting worse from here. They signed Daniel Jones to that money, and they ain't going to sign Barkley to a big contract this year if they finish not in the playoffs. There's no way. They're 1-3 right now. Yeah, and they don't look good. That game was sloppy, and I don't even want to go through fantasy scores. There's not even really anything to, I mean, Kenneth Walker, he had just another touchdown game, 13 points. Geno Smith 9. And DK Metcalf 12, and Tyler Lockett 9 points. Noah Fant had 8, and Daniel Jones, he had 11, and Matt Breida had 12, and Wan'Dale Robinson had 9, and Darren Waller 5, and Seattle's defense 30.
Yeah, the defense was the story there. Seattle's defense did well, but in New York, man, you don't last long in New York. You don't. The beat writers there, the media there, it crucifies everyone. I mean, everyone gets crucified in New York soon as you start not playing the way they think you should play. And Dable, he might be on the hot seat, man. You can only cheer rah rah and all that stuff and dance in the locker rooms with your team for so many times. They want wins. You're right. They didn't go out and get a receiver. They had plenty of opportunity to do that. Even in the draft, they could have got a top receiver.
Nothing.
They thought that Darren Waller was going to be the answer. I don't know why. That doesn't make any sense. So, they have a lot of work to do. Daniel Jones is not. No, Daniel Jones is just not the answer. And with Barkley being hurt again, they don't even have a good backup running back. Matt Breida is way beyond his years.
That's what I'm saying. Like, look at all the teams right now. They're drafting running backs in the third, fourth, fifth round to have behind. They have nobody. They have nobody.
No Brightwell.
No backup running back. It's on me how they did not try to shore in the offense. It's crazy to me.
And they're not great on defense.
No.
So it's like, I don't know what they're doing, but they're not doing it well. And Dable may be on the hot seat. And I don't even have time to rant on how bad the Giants are because, they're just a boring, lackluster team. And
maybe next week we'll put the Giants first so we can rant.
Right? Exactly. Because these guys, man, I don't know. I wouldn't say they're Bears, incompetence level, but they're pretty close. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're pretty close. So I don't know, man.
Done.
Yeah. Well, you got anything else?
No, it was a good week. It was a better week. I thought, games. I'm excited for week 5.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good week. And each week that the NFL season goes on, we start seeing really teams rising to the cream of the crop and teams that are really falling. And what I'm learning this year is that coaching seems this year to matter more than it ever has, because you have a rookie head coach like a D'Amico Ryans, and his team's looking good at 2-2. They got young studs on that team, and he's using them right, and they're playing loose, and they're out there winning some games. And then you have teams like the Giants and the Bears and Atlanta, that they have all these really well. The Giants don't have a lot of talent. The Bears have a lot of talent. Atlanta has a lot of talent, but the coaching just really, really sucks.
Well, the coach with the Cardinals, Gannon, like I was just saying earlier about, I know the Niners beat him, but that coach is a rookie coach, and he's making that team look. I mean, that team looks good of what they have, talent wise. They look good in the first. I mean, they don't look like a bad team. They look better
Exactly.
than the Bears and all the Giants. They really do.
Gannon has done a great job with the Cardinals, and they're 1-3.
Yeah,
They're 1-3, and I think he's done with that team. And they beat the number one team in
yeah.
the
Nation.
yeah, in the world.
Yeah, and they
So
almost beat the
anyway,
Giants too. Yeah,
they did, and they went into San Francisco and played them tough.
yep, they did.
They made
They
the
did.
Niners have to play. Niners have to play. So hopefully you got something good out of it. Thanks for listening. I'm Lonnie. He's Jake. We'll catch you on the next one.